1 minute left.
Okay, everyone. Hi. Case voting time is up, so we're gonna start the debate really soon. My name is Ryan. I'm from UE, and I'll be the chair for your red panels of the day. Judging with me should be Hezron and Josh. Are you both here?
Yes, we're here.
Yes, we're here.
Okay. Yeah. So under today's motion, the House believes that states should economically empower urban kampong dwellers as opposed to
Recording in
improving urban
progress.
physical conditions, including but not limited to infrastructure and all services in it. I call upon the Prime Minister. You have 7 minutes and 20 seconds. Don't forget to state your PI preference. Yeah, you can start.
Hello, I just want to make sure if I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
All right. I'm going to set my own timer just in case. Yeah. Wait for a second. All right. If you have any POI, please do unmute yourself because I will not be able to see the chats. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. People in urban kampong needs our help, but it's way better to provide them facilities so that later on they can be independent and so that we can increase their well-being. We're very proud to propose. Before I move on to my case, 3 points of setup, right? Firstly, what are we gonna do? Under our side, we're going to give people who live in urban kampong, like slums area in Jakarta, skills training, subsidy, education, and more that can economically benefit like these people. This is likely because realize how money for infrastructure is a lot. It can cost like trillion rupiah, and that's why we think if that money were to be allocated to economically empower these people, there will be less expense that have to be done by the government because we think that 400 trillion rupiah for infrastructure in status quo is like way too much for to be allocated for like economics, welfare, whatsoever, right? Comparatively, we think that opposition is more likely to pursue things like infrastructure, like building roads, houses, and so on. But note that infrastructure is exclusive under opposition and economics empowering is exclusive under proposition, right? But secondly, even though we are going to give these people money, government have the rights to supervise through monthly reports of like people's in like this urban kampong financial reports and whatnot, or to see how the progress through thank you of skills training inside of the urban kampong and so on. This is likely because government want to make the most out of their money. That means they have to supervise things to make sure that it's effective. Opposition might say the government status quo already gives them subsidy, but realize that this isn't enough because at best these people can only afford basic needs as opposed to with more subsidy and money that can happen in the outside the house. But the last setup, realize how if opposition wants to like build infrastructure like roads, better homes and whatnot, government will then have to provide more infrastructure like rumah susun or like temporary housing whatsoever during the transition of like improving the physical condition inside of like this urban kampong, right? 2 points of argumentation then. Firstly, on how urban kampong dwellers should be prioritized rather than infrastructure. Secondly, how pursuing urban kampong dwellers result to better investment, right? The first argument, how urban kampong dwellers should be prioritized than infrastructure. Let's take a look at status quo. We think that there are an increase of people who live in some areas in status quo, and this can be because of like massive urbanizations or like poverty of the country. This characterization proves that there are like that the reason why like and it's unstrategic to pursue infrastructure is realize how slum areas most likely happen in like underdeveloped or developing country. It means the capital of that government is limited, right? Therefore, having more like expense to fix the slum areas is expensive. This is perpetuated by opposition if they want to transition to infrastructure because it means they have to build more homes and whatnot during this transition. The second thing why then this is not strategic is because it is an opportunity cost. Realize how this is an opportunity cost. During the time of transitioning into infrastructure, there are like a certain period, that these people can use to like work, pursue skills training, or pursue better education that can benefit their life. But this will be hampered under opposition because they will exclusively focus on infrastructure. But also how this will eventually hamper like more economic
Hi
activity.
PM, really sorry. The chair just got disconnected.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Hi, I think someone is being being kicked out, so we're going to pause the debate.
Okay, so sorry for that. Am I audible?
Hi, yes, that you are.
Okay. I think you can resume the timer like at 2 minutes, 20 seconds. And the last thing you were talking about was the assertion why dwellers need to be prioritized.
I'm sorry, where did you lose me?
The last thing I heard was you saying the assertion was why dwellers need to be prioritized, and then you were just going to start that argument. So
Oh.
if we rewind the timer to 2 minutes and 20 seconds.
Sure. Can I continue my speech or should I wait?
Yeah, is the timekeeper ready with 2 minutes and 20 seconds?
Wait a minute.
Or we can forgo the timer from the timekeeper for now. I have my own timer and I set it at 2 minutes, 20 seconds.
Okay. So just like for information, my timer is currently at like 3 minutes. So it means I can do my speech until like 8, right? Because I have 40 seconds.
Yep. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Beck. I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. It was 2 minutes 27 seconds, right?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to continue my speech in 3, 2, 1. Firstly, talking about how urban kampung dwellers should be prioritized in infrastructure. Let's take a look at status quo, right? We think that there are increase of people who live in slum areas, and this can be because of like massive urbanization or like poverty inside the country. This characterization then results in 2 reasons why it is unstrategic to pursue infrastructure. Firstly, realize how slum areas most likely happen in underdeveloped or developing countries. It means the capital of government is limited. Therefore, having more expense to fix the slum areas is very expensive. These are perpetuated by ops if they want to transition to infrastructure because it means they have to build more homes and whatnot during the transition. But secondly, talking about the opportunity cost. During the time of transitioning into infrastructure, there are like a certain period that these people in slum areas can use to work or like pursue skills training or pursue like better education that can actually benefit their life. But this will be hampered under opposition because they will exclusively focus on infrastructure, right? But also how this will eventually hamper more economic activities that can benefit the country because that land that is used to build like rumah susun as a temporary houses while you transition can be built for like factories or like MNCs companies that will eventually like benefit the country as a whole. What's the comparative on the R side then? 2 things. Firstly, realize the inherent characteristic of economically empowering something or someone is that it is flexible. This can look like if I were given money by the government, I can allocate that to my business, education, or basic needs. Comparatively, that like infrastructure is not, right? It means that you can suddenly change roads into mall or something to benefit like your neighborhood and whatnot. Secondly, opposition might say that these people are gonna like be irrational with their money, but this is untrue because if I were economically desperate, the amount of money I get is a huge blessing, and I will use that wisely to lift up my living standards because I don't want to live in suffering, and humans inherently don't want to suffer. This is why I will utilize my money to benefit myself. This can look like I learn how to cook so I can be a cook in a restaurant or small business to actually benefit myself and get like more income whatsoever. In conclusion, we think that pursuing infrastructure will only results to like more misery, not only for the country but also like for the people, right? Moving on to the second argument on how pursuing no thank you urban kampung dwellers result to better investment. Looking at we think that just because you have like better housing does not mean that they can maintain these good facilities. Why? Two reasons. Firstly, looking at past precedences, this urban kampung used to also like be good housing, etc. But over time, because of like the crowded area, it turns into the way it is right now, right? But secondly, on the best case, it will work. But infrastructure does not mean that will lift up poverty, right? Comparatively, we have better certainty to ensure a better living standard through our skills training and education. We're able to make people in urban kampung more aware of how important economy is, how important money is, and whatnot. It means there will be more motivation for them to make like small business and whatnot. The reason why this is important is because sometimes people who live in slum area come from rural areas that usually have a lot of agriculture and crops, and it means they can utilize like this potential whatsoever to benefit themselves in the long run, right? What does this result to? This result to better productivity, because now people in slum areas who usually like pick up trash and whatnot can eventually like sell cookies, sell their crops, they can help their living and help them get more income. Comparatively, there will be less productivity because there will be false sense of security. Why is that? Because they will think that the existence of like good housing, good roads, and all those infrastructure already lifts up their living standards. Like that's a living proof that they're able to like afford better life and whatnot, and they will think that that in itself is enough. Why then this false sense of security exclusive under their side of the house? Because under our side, even if you have the money and the education, the money that you will get have to come through the process of like you making cookies, selling cookies, like selling those crops, planting those crops that will make individuals realize how hard it is to get the money. And it means like we're able to like mitigate this false sense of security, right? But why then on the our side is beneficial, right? Because the fact that now people in slum areas are more likely to have more awareness and knowledge on economy, technology, and like so many sectors, this results to the decrease of stigmatization towards slum areas people who are seen as unreliable. But why then this is important? Because this can be a momentum and platform for people in urban kampung to prove themselves to the like outer society that they can work like any other people in urban areas and have like the same capability and skills. This can look like where they deserve to be an employee instead of a company, instead of being like a regular like blue collar worker. At best, we're able to like improve at best, we're able to improve the quality of our human resources. They are able to increase the economic activity under our side so that we are able to improve our economy like as a whole, right? Comparatively, it is going to be hampered on the their side of the house because there's no real life proof that people in slum areas are able to work like urban areas and have the same productivity, for instance. At worst, this increases the stigmatization towards people who live in urban kampung. At best, the stigmatization is stagnant and it still harms the people who live in urban kampung because they are going to continuously being discriminated and mocked and will not have like the same opportunity to actually lift up their living standards, right? So in conclusion, through pursuing like this economic benefits towards dwellers inside the urban kampung, it results to better investment, which means we're able to ensure the prosperity of like people in the urban kampung. We're very proud to propose.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for that speech. Now I call upon the Leader of Opposition. If the timekeeper can share their timer now. Thank you.
Hi. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. If you've ever been to any slum areas in huge metropolitan areas like Jakarta, for instance, you'd know that the state and the living condition is not something that any human being deserves to live in. And to force them into those kinds of living conditions is something that's immoral in and of itself. It's almost impossible for them to have any incentive whatsoever that proposition is trying to claim. We're very proud to oppose. 3 points of framing why you're asked us to debate. Number 1, I think government clearly has a wrong stance, right? What it means to empower them economically is ultimately to just give them more subsidies under their side of the house. It's less likely for them to claim benefits such as education whatsoever. I think all of those things are also parts of infrastructure under our side of the house, right? Second point of framing. Look, you only get limited amounts of money on both sides of the house, right? So neither sides can claim both benefits. On governments, you get more subsidies, but you probably let them manage their own money themselves. And in opposition, you can probably get better housings, you can probably get better educations, better access to internet whatsoever under our side of the house, right? That's the kind of engagement they need. they need to have. But third point of framing, right? Even if education and all sorts of services that they are trying to claim is also existent on proposition, I think the prerequisite to getting those kinds of education and getting those kinds of services are probably infrastructure anyways, right? Because ultimately, if you don't have internet access, then you cannot go to school, especially in these kinds of times, right? That's ultimately the kind of thing that they need to defend. We're not sure what they're trying to get at. Two arguments that I want to hold my speech. Firstly, why principally governments have a moral obligation towards physical conditions of those individuals. And second of all, why pragmatically, I think improving physical conditions are better. First argument, right? I have two layers of analysis here. Firstly, I think the reason as to why they're poor and why they're ultimately in bad living conditions are ultimately the fault of the government, right? That is to say that the fact that they're not able to get any sorts of job, and the reason as to why they're probably okay with being blue collar jobs, for instance, right now, is ultimately the fault of the government, right? That is to say that the way in which we compensate for that has to be uniquely by giving them better housings, by giving them better living conditions in and of itself. But this is non-existent under proposition, right? Because it's ultimately not government's fault. The reason as to why they're not able to manage their money in the first place. The reason as to why they're poor is uniquely towards the way in which they're unable to actually access educations and all the facilities that other individuals, other successful individuals could possibly own, right? But the second layer of analysis here is proportionality, right? That is to say that the fact that governments ruin their future by not giving them levels of education and by not giving them access towards some infrastructures and transport towards like good jobs, for instance, towards like big areas and cities whatsoever, and why they're geographically far, for instance, is ultimately the reason as to why you ultimately ruin their future, right? The comparative here is simple, right? Giving them subsidies probably only lasts short term, especially when they concede to their own characterization, saying that they're probably less educated and they're probably unable to manage their money whatsoever, right? The money that in which you give them is most likely only going to last for a short period of time. It's not proportionate if you want to prepare them and compensate them for the future that you probably have ruined on the other side of the house. Second argument then, what pragmatically improving physical conditions are ultimately better. 4 layers of analysis here. Number one is that the needs of every individual is oftentimes very subjective from one family to another, right? That is to say that you can get one family with like 2 kids, for instance, and you can get another family with like 5 kids, for instance. The thing that makes it so problematic is that oftentimes governments only provide subsidies, oftentimes have like one objective amount of money for every single family, irrespective of the amount of children they have. This is likely to be possible on the other side of the house, anyways, even when you try to empower them economically, right? Why is that the case? For 2 reasons. Because number one, I think bureaucracies are very complicated on the other side of the house. That is to say that given their characterization on how slums are most likely very packed and are so numerous in the amounts of families they have, it's less likely for governments to go through each and every one family and check and like give different amounts of money for each family at the end of the day, right? But second of all, even if that's the case, in which you probably give them some levels of amounts of money, it's less likely to be the subjective needs, the needs of every single individual is still subjective anyways, right? That is to say that you probably get one kind of family that has like probably has some jobs that require more electricity, for instance, and you probably get some families with one jobs that probably require more transport because their jobs are far more like very far from their houses. That ultimately leads to so many problems in which they are unable to access to. The only solution towards those things are probably giving them some levels of infrastructure so that they're able to get stable jobs, they're able to get stable transports, and you probably have more incentive to work anyways. But second layer of analysis here is that in the long-term trajectory, giving them money is a bad prospect for 2 reasons. Number one is that you're ultimately then going to be dependent on government for survivability because you ultimately get money from them every month. Second of all is that money and your managing skills your money managing skills are most likely not going to be like an essential part of your skill in your life. This is likely for 2 different reasons, right? Number one, I think government can also concede to this because they're ultimately lacking in education, therefore money managing skills are probably very bad. But second of all, right, telling them to continue to stay in those living conditions means that you normalize them with those living conditions, right? When you normalize them with those living conditions, they're less likely to have any incentive whatsoever to want to look for better jobs, to look for white collar jobs and to improve their living standards, right? Because you're ultimately making them satisfied with the way in which they're living right now, and that's something that's horrendous. This is important to note for two different reasons. Number one is that they're not going to have any incentive whatsoever to look for more money, and that they're mostly going to be satisfied with the kind of living condition they are having right now. Is that number two is that they're most likely going to be dependent on the government for like survivability, and that's bad because governments are uniquely unstable for lots of reasons whatsoever, right? But third layer of analysis here is that uniquely governments are more likely, is that this money is oftentimes fluctuative, right? That is to say that a currency of a particular country and a particular money is oftentimes contingent upon the states of the country's economy, right? Look, right, the state of the country's economy is also contingent upon people's living condition. This is likely because you need to keep the economic cycle going. You need people to have the money to buy the products and in which the government provides. And that's ultimately less likely to happen under opposition. This is important to note for two reasons, right? Because number one, stability then becomes important, because you can never know when prices of oil or prices of sugar can rise, but the amount of subsidies you receive remain the same. It becomes problematic because individuals then are unable to put that in their decision-making calculus. You ultimately need a stable job in order to have more freedom in your life, to be able to have more happiness and more freedom and more capacity to make an option. All of those are non-existent in the proposition. Very proud to oppose.
Thank you, Leader of Opposition, for that speech. I welcome Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
Oh, hold on. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna start my speech. Okay. Hold on. Okay. Gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. We don't think that team opposition actually understands what this means, right? I'm gonna analyze this into like clashes and one clash and one extension, right? Which is firstly on the clash of which money allocation is more valuable, and secondly on preventing legacies, right? Before that, a few points of clarification, right? Firstly, our mechanism is that for government to give like occasional money to them, right? It's not like we're gonna give 1 billion at one time. We're gonna like give it occasionally, maybe for 6 months, maybe for like 3 months, for instance. But inherently, we're gonna give it occasionally and not like we'll just like dropping them with like $1 trillion, right? But secondly, though, they said on our side of the house that we're gonna only like give money, and that's bad, right? But three things. Firstly, our mechanism is that government can still supervise it. But B, looking at the history, for instance, even if we're gonna give them money, that doesn't mean that they will be irrational with it, right? Because they're gonna precious it by allocating to like education, for instance. And this is like clear because this is the thing that they've been like longing for the most, for instance, for like generation, right? Because they've been in the slums or like urban kampong for like generations, for instance, right? But thirdly, though, even if we're like only gonna give money, for instance, the unique benefit is under our side of the house is that you get the choice, right? You're not forced to like live in the like newly infrastructured new structure like house that government give you, right? The unique benefit under our side of the house is that money is like flexible, right? You can allocate it to education, for instance, or whatever that you think is most beneficial to you, right? And that is in itself already like increase the livelihood of people because they already have the choice to actually determine their own steps of life, right? No, thank you. But secondly, though, they said that education is contingent on infrastructure, right? Two things. Firstly, I think outside of our urban kampong, there's still access to education, like public school, that can be afforded by people based on subsidy. But secondly, though, even if it's true, that's fine because we think that skills training can be done outside of urban kampong. Therefore, it's not always contingent on the infrastructure that you're going to build in urban kampong. Therefore, it is like inexclusive, right? So moving to the clashes then about which money allocation is much more valuable, right? And they say two things here. Firstly, they say that, and they say quite and they make a big championing that subsidies is short-termist, right? The response, firstly, no, right? We told you that internal incentive to use it wisely. It still exists in the arts of the house, right? But realize how government can actually eventually lift up those money if they see like in financial report that they're using their money excessively and unnecessarily need, right? We think that it's feasible because government can actually like get the data, etc., right? But secondly, though, even if it's true like that subsidies is short-term, it's not like dwellers will like spend it on Gucci or Zara, for instance. I think that they're like pretty rational and to like allocate it to a better things, for instance, for the betterment of their own life, right? But thirdly, though, why is this worse on their side of the house, right? Because their characterization is that they're not that educated. But how then? Like with that own characterization, how then would you ensure that they're gonna maintain the like all white houses, considering that past precedences? No, thank you. That past precedences that these like slums area actually stems is used to like be like this good infrastructure, right? Comparatively, though, on the other side of the house, this like exactly because government will give this occasion, for instance, it will not be like short termist, etc., right? But second thing that they say, though, on the other side of the house, these people will be dependent of the government, right? Few responses. Firstly, even if it's true, we think that that is okay because government is the reason that they are in urban coming in the first place. For instance, like capitalism or even like structural discrimination from the government, for instance, even that still exists, right? Because government cannot supervise them and choose to neglect them, for instance, and therefore, like it is actually just for government for them to be dependent of the government, right? Secondly, though, it will be worse on their side of the house because sure they will not be dependent on your side of the house, but government will then neglect you on the long term, right? Because the government will feel like the false sense of security that they already help the people on the slums because they think that they already have good housing, for instance, and therefore like my problem is solved, right? And that is what Abel already told you and never have been rebutted. Therefore, we think that point still stands. Moving to the extension then about how then we're preventing megacity, right? And I want to define megacity as cities that already have more population that it can handle, right? This looks like Mumbai in India, for instance, where everywhere is crowded, etc., right? What is the correlation, right? And this is important because this actually responding to their point about internet scarcity is not true, and therefore but people cannot get it, and people cannot get education, right? What is the correlation then? Notice the characterization of urban kampung is that it usually located at the center of the city, right? This is why you see more slums in the center of Jakarta, for instance, even though it's hidden between the big buildings of apartment, right? This is because these dwellers comes from the people who want to move to Jakarta to get a job, but they cannot because of the competition. Therefore, like they make they located in the center of the Jakarta, for instance, right? What happens on their side of the house, right? Because they're gonna build in the slums, making houses for them, making job fields there, for instance, on the best case scenario, in order to make better services, right? Two results of this. Firstly, this will give false sense of security that they will be comfortable in there, right? This is because imagine after living in the slums after generations and government suddenly improving their house for them, you'd be so happy that you get those false sense that I'm already helped. Why would I need like to do job, for instance, right? We told you that this is exclusive because they already see a real life proof of your deviation of your like illusion of deviation of poverty rather than on the other side of the house where you don't get that, right? But the second result is that you will make the city even more crowded, right? Because I think that this is inherent on their side of the house because of two things. Firstly, because of more people will be incentivized to move there because of the betterment of the infrastructure, right? Because I think that's a psychological thing, right? You'll rather move to like a city that is that will that have like better infrastructure, for instance, rather than the bad ones, right? Therefore, they will not. Therefore, that this is not a benefit that they can just. Therefore, they cannot just make this as a benefit. But second thing on why is that this is exclusive to their side of the house because in our side of the house, these people are not forced to live in that area again, right? They have the freedom of choice to move out, for instance, which is likely because maybe they are tired of living there, right? This is exclusive because we give capital to the individual that is already there inside of the urban kampung rather than their side of the house, where the benefit also goes to the people that is going there because you cannot just like gatekeep an infrastructure, right? Why is it harmful on their side for making mega cities? Two things. Firstly, lesser livelihood of the people overall because of the perpetuated competition of job field, making unemployment rate go up and therefore lesser income to provide themselves. But B, for the environment, for instance, I think that there will be more transportation waste because more people need to get transported, etc., right? The way in here is that sure they get better infrastructure, but that doesn't ensure you that people's poverty is getting lifted suddenly because that's the urgency that we told you, right? Opposition is dining on a stinking boat. We are so proud to.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. Now I call upon Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here.
Yeah, hi. I'm audible?
Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna start my speech. I have no preferred gender pronouns, but POI you can just unmute to chat. But since I won't be looking at the chat box anyway, I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. look like panels, I think it's pretty clear economic is exclusive on government side of the house, and infrastructure is very exclusive on upside, right? Sure. But what is inexclusive in both sides of the house is the government in of itself, right? Government never understand this point. Notice how I'm going to argue what's very problematic with the government, right? I think that governments are more likely to be corrupt because of what you're doing is just basically you're giving a sum of money in which the government can lie about is because it's just basically numbers and papers, right? Notice how I say inexclusive, right? This is main second point because that is to say this this also exists on the other side of the house where the government is more likely to be corrupted. You're welcome, golf. But on the other side of the house, here's the delta. Point number 3, in which corruption is easier to do. The delta here is which one is easier to do like corruption, right? First, like government can simply lie about numbers. That is exactly what's going to happen on the gov side. On the other side of the house, like if your program is focused on JAXA and you have like 1 trillion budget, but nothing changes, gov is more like government on the other side of the house is more likely to be called out. On the other side of the house, there exists a check and balance, right? But secondly, is how reports that are towards the government submitted exist, right? That is to say, like you have a government, like a government official are report like obliged to like submit the report about what materials are going to buy with the budget, so on and so forth. I think that this is enough to be check and balance. Side gov cannot just simply say, but yeah, your government is corrupt and all, because corruption happens more like in the rest of the house. Your mechanism is flawed, right? But we have to my rebuttal. I have like 2 rebuttals coming from the rest of the house with so many layers in it, right? Firstly, what did they told you? They told you that there's going to be massive increase in like there's a massive increase of people in slum, how the capital government is limited, therefore it's expensive to fix slum areas. That's why they should be transitioning into infrastructure, right? How they argue to that those people can receive education. I just like to point out how building infrastructure means also we're building like schools, hospitals, so on and so forth, like how we're building like a better infrastructure for those people, right? Governments of the house literally killed that case from the very beginning because PM said it straight from the beginning. The economic is exclusive on gov side and infrastructure is exclusive on our side of the house. So they try to argue about education. That is to say, they killed their case because they just made everything exclusive. Their side of the house has no practical benefit whatsoever. It's very blurry, right? Secondly, though, is that their latter argument from about economical awareness for the people is dependent on the fact that those people will receive education anyway. But we said it straight, even from the PM, and we conceded that anyway about how infrastructure means like better education and whatnot. Under the side of the house, their very argument about how people are able to like manage money well, about how people can learn about such things and how they're able to like get better education is dependent on the fact that education that is going to be reached in the rest of the house. We proved to you why that's not the case, right? Second rebuttal though, how they try to argue to that people won't use money carrots under the side government, right? I think there are 5 layers in this point. I'm going to rebut. Like, firstly is how Matt tried to argue to you about dependency on the government, like what Matt said, right? That is to say, they won't even try to work because every period of time, because they know they'll receive 500K rupiah every month, they're more likely to like live carelessly and whatnot, right? So it's a comparative, like let's see under side of the house. Under side of the house, we have given the capability to better the economic activity we have there, creating like microeconomy activities, right? I'm going to explain this later in my extension. This is going to link back. Third is the hedonistic treadmill, right? Notice how this is more likely to happen on their side of the house because if you just like give them a large sum of money in status if you compare with status quo, their daily life condition enables them to buy daily necessities so easy, right? That's why you get people who like ask money in the streets and so on and so forth. In the moment in which you give them money, like a large sum of money, like 4K every month, that is to say then they're able to like buy those things that they cannot do previously. Then there's this like hedonistic treadmill that exists in their head about how it's so easy to get them. That is why you get carelessness on their side of the house, right? But fourth layer though, even if somehow this hedonistic treadmill doesn't affect anyone, there is the living condition that they have will even force them to use the money carelessly, right? This is even if they're not irrational, like if they're still living like in areas where the water is very rough, water is very corrupted, they will be forced to buy mineral water. On their side of the house, those money will be used carelessly because it's not logical because you can simply just like build the infrastructure better about how you can make better water mechanism and whatnot. The comparative understanding also is that the moment in which we fix the water, even though if it takes a long time, like what PM argued to you, we're still going to take that off because those people won't because at the very least those will have better living conditions, like I argued to you. But fourth point though, let's just bite the bullet and assume even if somehow your mismatch analysis about education still works, like the living condition doesn't change anyway, like how the living condition, notice how the living condition doesn't change anyway, right? Like how even if you're able to go to school, it doesn't matter because you cannot study at home when your roof is broken and rainwater drops and seeps and makes your books wet, or you don't have electricity to study at night because there is no infrastructure better on the rest of the house. Your side of the house has a failed analysis, right? But we have to my extension, right? Let's just assume all the benefits coming from gov runs and assume all the benefits coming from up run anyways. How do we break the deadlock about benefit on the rest of the house, right? Let's just portray firstly how the infrastructure betterment looks like. This is a better water source, better houses, better roads, better access towards the urban kampung area, better education and whatnot, right? Under sub the house, second point though, we are able to like produce more SMEs, small to middle enterprises. Why this is more likely? 4 points in this. First, I think that what essentially stops people from coming to urban kampung areas is the sensation that it gives anyway, right? Let's just say what happens when you pass through urban kampung areas or when you mention it, like stinky is a lot of trash, basically it's not worthy to go into. This is essentially the functional programs like governmental programs like Kota Kumo exist because proposed programs better the infrastructure inside those things. This is directly answering PM's fear about stigmatization because governmental programs like building infrastructure betters this stigmatization inside status quo. 3 more layers to go. 3 reasons to why stigma exists. First is the access towards urban kampung areas. They say like you're more unlikely to build warungs and other SMEs if your supplier cannot send supplies to your warung that easily because there is no good quality road. Under the house, when we build like good quality roads, this is exactly when if you build warung, you get more supply and whatnot. Right? There's to say microeconomy exists under the house because the access towards it is available. Point about infrastructure. I don't think that people want to come and eat nasi uduk in your warung when all you have is an old wooden chair and table with a clamp of metal covering your head. Infrastructure matter, right? I think Gov needs to realize this. In which we better infrastructure is to say we build more ruko like small houses. That is to say under the house, those people are able to like build a worthy enough businesses. People then want to go there and they want to like eat there. Microeconomy happen there the house. This is less likely to happen because the house doesn't have like worthy warung and whatnot. First, the maintenance of itself. I think it's important to note because Gulf benefit doesn't reach up to this point. I think Gulf side needs to notice current condition of urban kampung areas where there are bacteria infected water. This in itself affects SME. Like how when you like wash dishes in urban kampung areas, you use like to drop water, use like corrupted water to like basically like serum the dishes. What happens under the house when you better the water system is that the moment in which you better water system, they're able to like wash dishes with clean water, with like recycled water, filter water, so on and so forth. I think this all 4 things matter under the house and are better anyway, right? These 4 layers directly clash with DPM. When she told you that under upside, we're going to make them comfortable. I think this is not true because I showed to you why we don't like give them money, kerosene, and let them like enjoy, like use them or however they want. Because under the house, we simply like give them capability to build businesses SME. Under the house, we make people not living comfortably and we make them independent under the house. So proud to.
Okay, so sorry for that. My connection dropped again. For the DLO, can you repeat the last 1 minute of your speech? So from 6 minutes, 20 seconds. The last thing that you were saying is no one will want to come and sit and eat nasi uduk in your warung if all you have is an old wooden chair, and then I got disconnected.
Okay.
So sorry.
So wait, what time is it again? Because I stopped my timer already.
6 minutes, 20 seconds. So you have 1 minute.
Oh, I have 1 minute. Okay. I'm gonna start my speech again in 3, 2, 1. Let's just say then when we better like the condition of the ruko in which people sit and eat inside the warung, then people are then more people are going to come in there, then the business flourishes anyway. Under the house, we'll be able to build better SMEs. This is less likely to happen there Gulf side because people don't want to like sit in a wooden chair and whatnot. Right? 4th layer is the maintenance in of itself. I think this is important to note because Gulf's benefit doesn't reach up to this point. I think Gulf side needs to notice that current condition in urban kampung areas, right, where they have bacterial infected water, this in itself affects SME or how people and SME like wash dishes with like bacteria infected waters on how they just simply serum dishes and whatnot. Under the house, the comparative then is when we better the water system, what happens is that they're able to like wash dishes with normal water and water, with clean water and filtered water, so on and so forth. Under the house, the maintenance is much better anyway. These 4 layers directly clash with DPM. When she told you that under upside, we're just going to make them comfortable, that's what she questioned anyway, right? I've showed you why this is not true because what happens under the house is we simply give them the capability to build more SME and businesses and microeconomy. Under the house, we're able to make them independent anyway. So proud to oppose.
Okay, thank you so much. Now I'll call upon the government whip. Here.
Firstly, I just want to check, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Oh, all right, wait. I'm going to set my timer first. Okay. So I'm going to start my speech in three, wait, in 3, 2, 1. Changes can only be made if you actually fix the main reason why that problem exists, right? Opposition is too naive to say that fixing physical condition equals to prosperous life, right? Because no, in the end, they would never have the knowledge how to take care and control that, and maintaining that kinds of thing that was built by government side of the government in that country, right? And physical condition can change among time, like how at first in slum areas in Jakarta is actually a little, and it was increasing as times goes by, right? So if you want a sustainability of living, a better livelihood for all society, you need to help. You need to actually help the living actors, i.e. the dwellers itself, right? You need to put for proposition since our way is actually more flexible. I'm going to actually talk about two things. Firstly, why just empowering the physical condition of urban kampung would never change anything. Secondly, the efficacy of empowering urban kampung dwellers, right? Helping these people. But before that, I'm going to make several clarification, right? So the most biggest thing that I noticed from their case is that they say that improving infrastructure means that they can just build schools or etc. Like what they DLO said, right? I think this is actually not true anyway, because urban kampung is literally small areas with literally hundreds of people stacking to each other. We don't think that you actually just can fit schools there, right? But even if it's true, it is actually symmetrical, because with money, these people can get extra courses in school or actually studying from studying other instances, right? But see, then they say that it is worse because students are gonna come home to houses without ceilings anyway. But literally, we prove to you how that these dwellers are likely to move out and get a better house outside urbans, like what have been explained by Finda and Abel, because they're actually tired of living house and now they can access better housing with that education that we have proved to you, right? That is why the biggest claim of how they try to co-opt our benefit by having education is not true at all, right? Moving on to my first thing, that what do they why just by empowering the physical condition of urban kampung would never change anything, right? We have proven to you how changing physical condition will be very expensive, since we're most likely talking about and even right now still developing countries, right? We proved to you how we can change, create changes, effective changes just with less spending, right? What do they say? They say that subsidies are actually short term, but this is actually very important, because from the beginning of the day, I will have actually prevent this argument, right? Their biggest case have fall from the moment Abel said their speech is on how people are not that irrational, because we're actually talking the same dwellers, right? If dwellers are actually that irrational to spend their money, as in, for example, buying Gucci or Zara or something brand stuff, it means that in your side of the house, people will be also irrational. People doesn't have the mindset to actually, people are also irrational and uneducated to maintain the thing that government have already provided for them, right? So if they try to say that people are that irrational in our side of the house, so it means in their side of the house, their biggest benefit on how it will create facilities, better housing or what, will also fall in the end of the day, because they could never took care of it, right? Now, they say that they can have better water or etc, right? But this is actually very highly inexclusive, because we think that those things that opposition characterize to you is essential to your livelihood. Therefore, when you have this money from government, you'll build better pipes yourself, because you have the incentive. This is more likely than buying Zara or Gucci. That means their whole case is highly and a highly very inexclusive and exclusive, right? But then, other than talking about how it is very expensive, we have proven to you on Finda's extension how private megacities will actually likely to happen in their side of the house, right? This case is very important, because it we have proven to you how it will be very crowded into in one area if you actually try to use their mechanism, right? When I have explained to you, mean crowded, it's actually equal to lesser livelihood. This has been being unresponded by their side of the house, right? So what does it mean? It means that in our side of the house, we could protect the most vulnerable actor, society, and also these dwellers itself, because we wouldn't actually have this private megacities, because it will be only exist in their side of the house when you actually build more houses
housing or like infrastructure, right? It means that the changes or even the harm is irreversible in your side of the house, but not in ours, because we can still mitigate it, right? Now, secondly, I'm going to talk about the efficacy of empowering urban kampung dwellers, right? We have already explained to you how the allocation of money will be more flexible because it depends on the dwellers' needs, right? And B, we have already actually explained to you how during the period of transition of building how during the period of transition of building infrastructure in urban kampung area, government have to build like temporary housing in other lands that hampers economy activities, and this has not been rebutted at all, right? This is crucial because this is very crucial because what do they say? They say that all of these two reasons will not actually all of these two things that we have explained to you is contingent to the reason that on how on how people will be that irrational, and actually education is contingent to infrastructure, right? But we have explained to you from the beginning, like the beginning of our case, because beginning of our case that A realized that right now we're actually going to give money, right? So they're the one who's going to control it, right? But B, if they need internet about how about education is contingent to infrastructure. If they need internet connection or someone they can buy it with the money, and it actually depends on their needs, right? But then they actually came into this debate and tell that subsidies are short term because dwellers cannot control it, so the allocation is going to be effective. That is their biggest case, right? Note that we're actually talking about the same dwellers, so if they don't have the basic education, then they wouldn't have they will also be irrational in their side of the house, right? I think this is unhighly true, because the fact that I know how it feels to live in poverty means I'm going to take to think how to make that money is actually going to help me improve my quality of living, right? But B, note the fact that they know that government actually supervise them, as what Abel have explained to you. They know how they need to use it effectively, since they are scared that government would never help them again, right? What is the way? The way is that the certainty of changes in our side of the house is better, since we have a sustainability of skills from the education that they got, but they will never have it. But B, we actually give them option where they want to actually spend their money. Since everyone needs is actually very universal and very different, but they are not going to have that kinds of option, right? Opposition is drinking in a sinking boat. That is why you need to vote for our side of the house.
Thank you, government whip. Now I call upon the opposition whip. Here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, please wait a few seconds. I'm setting my personal timer. Okay, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels, the prerequisite for people in urban kampung to be able to rise economically is by raising their physical condition first, which is infrastructure and better access to services, in hope that they can live a better and more peaceful life. The reason why it shouldn't be okay for them to be dependent on government is because even though it's most probably government fault, we at least have to try and fix this and give solution, not to prolong the cycle of these people suffering and making them dependent on government longer. Moreover, under our side, we told you multiple times that it is in fact these people won't be dependent on government for a long period of time. So I don't get why the government team still doesn't think that this is beneficial at all. We don't think that being dependent on government is that important under your side, because we give you better alternative anyways. Framings, 3-point framings. First, there is no mechanization whatsoever on proposition. They never showed you on how much money they are going to subsidize. It is enough money for them to look for houses themselves or to look for a school themselves. Secondly, notice the contradiction in their case, right? Because they argue that they want to let them have a choice where they want to live and all that. But at the same time, they said to you that you want governments to have a surveillance systems to make sure people are going to use the money rationally. Thirdly, the government whip came with late assertion, by the way. She said that the areas are packed and it's impossible to create new schools in the middle of them. Number one, feasibility isn't the problem. This is not a policy debate. It's a fiat that this is possible, and it's also a fiat for proposition that you have money to increase the sums of subsidies. Number two, even if you have to gusur and build new rumah susun, like what Ahok did, we're more than happy to do so. Rebuttals. First, they told you that people are rational enough to manage their own money, which was like their biggest claim in their whole entire argument. Firstly, look, the PM said it herself that they're most likely poorly educated, and the prerequisite to be able to manage their own money better is to have education. And because when you're able to save money and invest and so on, you have to have like better education, basic education of that. Secondly, sure, let's assume that people are rational, but it's the amount of money you give them enough for them to actually invest in lots of stuff, because you still have to eat like 3 times a day, and you still have to pay for tax. You still might have to feed like 5 mouths in your family. You probably won't have enough money to invest in other stuff or put money in bank, because it's going to be finished even before you're able to do so. But thirdly, even if you get this large sum of money, like 1 billion rupiahs for each family, which is unlikely because proposition also consider that government probably don't have that much money, Matt argues on how that's much worse, right? Because number one, money is fluctuative. So even when you get that large amount of money, the currency might drop at some point, and the value of that 1 billion rupiah might decrease. But secondly, this decreases the incentive for them to want to look for jobs. And they also think that they will use this money management well, because it's a blessing. Okay, if our responses weren't enough, okay, let's look at the status quo right now, right? They use their money to buy cigarettes, and they think that medicine is not important, and like they don't even know how to invest. They don't put their money in their banks, and because they don't have the education, they don't know how to do so. So like, how can they think about the importance of these like money education when they cannot get a peaceful and nice living? Now, if you think that it will work, money management will work, just look at the status quo right now and see how it really looks like in reality. Secondly, they told you about like the false sense of alleviation of poverty. Okay, we don't see any problem in this, right? Because it's much better for them to feel happy living in a good housing as opposed to continue living in slums, because ultimately they would want to make sure that they keep that form of happiness and incentivize them to look for jobs, comparatively in being normalized to living in that terrible condition and being satisfied with it because their benchmark of happiness is that low. But thirdly, they also told you, okay, now let's go on to my clashes. First, what did they told you? They told you that transitioning needs rumah susun, and if we want to build infrastructures or etc. I think Randall gave like 4 reasonings as to why economic activity still exists under our side of the house anyways. But before that, I think like it's okay, because rumah susun can literally be used for like other stuff, even for like more people. It can fit more people and etc. So what's 4 layers that he gave? First, governmental programs are better that better the condition, like Kotaku this is directly like answering PM's fear about stigmatization on how people are able to build business worthy warungs, so that link into. And thirdly, the access towards urban kampung, which translates to how suppliers are able to send supplies and then enable the micro activity to keep going. And fourthly, the maintenance in and of itself. We change people in SMEs who used to wash dishes with like using dirty water to washing dishes with clean filtered water. I think this is what breaks deadlock, because their only response from coming from WIP was like, because people are irrational anyways, they wouldn't use the infrastructure to make businesses. The delta here is that the money can basically be used for anything. You can buy mineral water, you can pay debt, so on and so forth. That is why Randall analyzes about like hedonistic treadmill is most likely to work. The comparative is Ruko and whatnot cannot just be used for anything. Like probably the only thing you can do is build warung. Our side makes people independent. Their side just basically makes people more comfortable and over dependent on government. But they also told you that corruption and misuse will be like unlikely, because there are financial report and data, which 5 responses to this. First, it's just for like these money are for a short period of time, and therefore gov have to like continuously take like much checking time one by one if they spend the money wisely or not. And secondly, Matt told you that family needs are subjective. What they need is not only money. The probably like the solution to that is probably giving infrastructure, like for example electricity, which Randall added few more layers to this, which wasn't responded by the government whip at all. And thirdly, secondly, the hedonistic treadmill. And even if this somehow this hedonistic treadmill doesn't affect anyone, the living condition that they have will force them to use the money carelessly, right? That is to say that they have dirty water, and at the end of the day, they will have to buy mineral water. This is important to note, because from Randall analyzes, because under side government, those money will simply go to waste. Under our side of the house, the trade-off is even better, because even if it's pricey to fix, then it's still okay. But Randall still took their best case and assumed that even if somehow you mismatch analysis on how education still works, the living condition doesn't change anyway, right? Like how even if you're able to go to school, it doesn't matter because you cannot study at home with like your roof broken and stuff like that. It makes your book wet and etc. Your case doesn't cater to those people that are trying to help. Thirdly, comparatively, under our side, infrastructure is feasible, inexclusive for government to. It is inexclusive for government to corrupt, but surely uniquely, government is more likely to corrupt on subsidies rather than infrastructure, because like infrastructure is feasible and you can see them. So we give you better benefits. So proud to.
Thank you, opposition whip. Now to close the case from opposition, we'll call upon the reply for the opposition team.
Hello, I'm audible.
Yes.
Sorry. Cool. I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Look, if proposition wants them to get education the way you do it, wants you to get education, the way you do it is not by giving them money and tell them to look for a school themselves. It's to build schools for them and let them access it for free. It's not just to give them some money and let them manage it themselves, given their lack of education. It's to ultimately give them their education and then let them have the capability to look for money themselves and let them be able to manage it themselves and probably improve their better living conditions. When the prerequisite to that is whatever we're saying, right? 2 points of framing why the losses debate. Number 1, it's never clear on all 3 speakers how much money you're going to give on proposition, right? Is it going to be like $1 billion per family per month? Or is it just going to be the bare minimum? We were charitable and engaged in both cases, right? We told you that if it's ultimately going to be a bare minimum, then it's probably not going to be enough for them to be able to look for schools themselves, to look for private schools probably because they ultimately have to pay. It's probably not enough for them to want to look for a housing themselves because that's ultimately expensive anyways, right? If you ultimately want them to get better housing and you ultimately want them to get better education, then let the government provide it at the end of the day. But look, even if in the best case scenario that you miraculously have actually that enough amount of money, like $1 billion per family per month, we already argued to you anyways, well, that's probably bad how that's probably bad, right? But second point of framing, notice the contradiction on the other side of the house, right? I think proposition kept arguing that we want to give them freedom on what they want to buy. Like you want them to be able to have the freedom to choose whatever school they want. You want them to have the freedom to choose whatever like housings they want, right? But at the same time, they told you that you also want to have a surveillance system in order to make sure that they don't irrationally make the decision and we are able to manage their money well. We don't understand what they're trying to get at. They are allowed to pay. One point of frame then, which I think, one point of question, right, which I think is the only thing that clashes in this debate, whether they're actually able to use their money rationally or not, and why that's ultimately bad, whether this is good for like the long term whatsoever, right? The first thing they said here was that people are ultimately rational enough because the fact that you've been poor, you probably know the steps in which you probably want to become rich, right? We gave you several responses to this, right? We showed you that number 1, if ultimately they're actually that poorly uneducated, then they're less likely to be able to actually invest in stuff. They're less likely to save money in banks whatsoever. Money managing is something that's exclusive under our side of the house when you give them levels of education, right? But second of all, it's less likely for them to be able to actually do that because you probably don't get that much money anyways, right? At best, the kind of subsidies you get under proposition is like an increase of 1 million rupiah from like as an increase of like 2 million rupiah from 1 million rupiah beforehand, right? That is to say that even if that's the case, you probably still don't have enough money to like be able to save money in banks because you have to reallocate all of those stuff into paying taxes, into paying for like gas, into paying for transport, into paying for like food and all of that, when you could possibly have the infrastructure for all of those things in which they're less likely to pay for under our side of the house. But thirdly, right, we show to you that even if that's the case, you get that huge amount of money, we show to you that money is ultimately fluctuative in and of itself, right? And in order for you to have the freedom to be able to use whatever, how much money you want, you ultimately need stability and security. You only get stability and security under our side of the house when you have more access to jobs and when you have more access to jobs and more access to infrastructure under our side of the house. We take all their claim under our side of the house. But second of all, right, they told you that ultimately this is going to be bad for the long term because you're most likely going to be used to living in those good condition and good housings, right? We gave you several responses to this. Number one, we should say that that's not a huge problem, right? Living in better conditions is probably the prerequisite to have the motivation to be able to keep that good living condition. The comparative is being normalized with this terrible living condition and feeling that that's your happiness and that that's something that's enough for you. You probably don't have to look for other jobs. For all those reasons, very proud to.
Okay, thank you, opposition reply. Now to close this debate, government reply. Here.
Hi, I just want to make sure if I'm audible.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Starting my speech. In 3, 2, 1. Opposition is dining on a sinking boat. People under opposition will enjoy all the infrastructures, but will end up sinking to misery because the infra will not be sustainable and opposition fail to ensure society's well-being, and this speech is going to prove you why. 4 mistakes to point out before we move on to my class, right? Firstly, they say that we backlash ourselves when we say that government will still supervise. But notice what we mean by choice is for people to pursue things that are good for their livelihood. If it's something that will harm them in the future, then this is when supervision of government is needed. I don't think that this is a backlash, right? Secondly, I don't think that their argument about moral obligation contributes much to the debate because we believe that we're also trying to compensate the people who live in slum areas through economically empowers these people means moral obligation and compensation is simply not exclusive. But thirdly, I think at worst, both teams have less mechanism, right? LO never explained how much money they're going to allocate for infrastructure. But why then our mechanism should be credited more? Because we told you how infrastructure needs a lot of money because we literally build lots of things. Compared it to subsidy, where even if it's a lot of, where if it's a lot, the comparative will spend less more money than infrastructure. This can look like where infrastructure needs 400 trillion, subsidy will most probably need 200 trillion, which means our benefit will be more certain because we provide more clarity. But lastly, I think that opposition whip gives you 2 late points that does not deserve to be credited. Firstly, on rebutting on the process of transitioning to infrastructure, and secondly, how money fluctuates and change the currency whatsoever, right? 2 points of clash that. Firstly, is subsidy strategic? Secondly, who better ensures people well-being? On the first clash, is subsidy strategic? We told you 2 things. First, yes, because it will make people learn to be responsible of their belonging because these dwellers are literally responsible for whatever happens to their money. But second, because we're gonna give money only to the people who already live there, while in opposition, infrastructure is going to be used also for the people that might move in the future, which empowers our point about megacities in their side. What do they say? Firstly, education is contingent on infrastructure. Even if this is true, through the subsidy we give these people, they can still afford education in public school, where it is comparatively more accessible in status quo and still have decent quality to support the livelihood of these people, right? But second, they keep saying that this is a harm. We prove to you how we are still allowing people to move back to their rural areas, for instance, or move to other houses. What's the delta? Delta is that we are more likely to not take other lands that can be beneficial for economic cities, and that's why our side is more beneficial. The next thing they say is that subsidy is short-lived. No, right? People will use it wisely because people don't want to suffer for living in urban kampung areas. That's why they will have the incentive to pursue better livelihood. At worst, this is symmetrical, right? If people are that rational under us, right, it is also likely that people are going to be rational with the existence of infrastructure. Through LO characterization that people in urban kampung have less education and knowledge as opposed to other society means that they will not be able to sustain and maintain their infrastructure, which means it is a lost cause for government to develop this. It has already been explained from the first, right? But why do we win this clash? Because we give you a larger scale of benefit by giving them choices to pursue a better livelihood as opposed to infrastructure which is not flexible and whatnot, right? Moving on to the second clash on who better ensures people well-being. What do we say? First, how during the period of transition of building infrastructure in urban kampung area, government have to build temporary housing and other land that hampers economic activities. This has not been rebutted at all. This is crucial because because it means that their economic development that can sustain the well-being of these people in urban kampong will be obstructed because it hampered the economic activities in the very first place. But second, how relying on infrastructure is not enough because it will be at best sustaining the stigmatization towards urban kampong people, but at worst perpetuates more stigmatization, no prosperity for these people. But lastly, at best, and it's important, even if infrastructure is beneficial, government and people will have false sense of security because they will think that infrastructure equals benefit. It means it is likely the government will not continue the development of infrastructure in urban kampong, and individuals will have less incentive to lift their living standard because they think whatever infra they have right now is enough. It means that their benefit will be stagnant, right? What do they say? They say that both sides believe that people are gonna like be irrational on the opposing side, right? But why do you need to believe our context more that irrational when you give like infrastructure is because our claim is why human inherently don't want to suffer still does not get responded, right? But why do we win this fight? Because we give you certainty that we're able to protect the most vulnerable actor, which is people who live in urban kampong that both sides are trying to protect through protecting them from stigmatization from opposition is the only side who protects the people in short term and long term, and that is what is the most important. Very, very proud.
Okay, thank you, government reply for that speech. Now the debate is over. Please either allocate us to the breakout room so that we can deliberate. Please refer to the ORCOM what you have to do after this debate. But congratulations for finishing the grand final, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Everyone.
Okay, that marks today's economic debate competition. Thank you guys for debating. The winner of this round will be announced at the awarding night, which will start at 7:20 p.m. See you guys there. Thank you.
Recording stopped.